going to work in this country, and he said to me, the ambassador wants to teach you the meaning of the word loyalty, which is on the top of every oath if you've ever signed one, and if you've lived in a country that's demanded one. You see, you can't go by the arbiters. The continuing romance is with the public, and that's where you have to go. You'll know soon enough if you're not saying what the public wants. There's this vast silence. They're like a jury if you don't reach an audience. There's nothing. When you get agents that don't want to make money, when press agents who make $1,000 a month for 6 years quit and say things to you like, you can't say that about my president when you're telling jokes, I think there's a point at which you have to pause.
Who got your job here?
What? I'm sorry.
Who was the press agent at that time?
Warren Cowan.
Who'd you talk to about the job here now?
Well, I go back with the Marienthals. They gave me the first chance in this town in 1956. So I go way back.
Well, have you talked about returning here when you finish this engagement with anyone?
No, one step at a time. We're working on this one now, but...
Joe Kennedy's not in a position physically to reply to anybody.
I don't know how the...
He's paralyzed. Wants to speak.
I'm telling you that somebody said that they acted on his behalf and in his name. Milt Evans and Mr. Lawford. He's Lawford's manager, and he was mine for 6 years.
Have you talked this over with Lawford?
The implication
Terribly unavailable. Lawford did tell me it would be nice if you'd listen to reason because we could all have dinner at the White House. You do all understand that one dinner at the White House with any president is the end of my license. That's the end. Then you start reading columns by people like Nat Hentoff who say, this guy isn't as subversive as I had hoped. He's right. I think that's the phrase. There's a ghostwriter for Nat Hentoff.
Now, Lawford is estranged from the Kennedys, too, now. Presumably, he would be willing to talk to you now, has he?
He was the recreation director at the time. No, he certainly was. Ask him. I'd be happy, for him to tell his side of all this, but... At the same time that I stopped working in Los Angeles, everyone stopped talking to me. You might ask some of the stars how I got the mark of Cain and what they know in that town. I had a pretty fair degree of friends out there and penetration in there, but not anymore. It's quite amazing. It's just, when I say the mark, I give it to you straight. I'll be talking about a lot of the people involved in the book. My best friend out there was Paul Newman. He does not talk to me anymore. I was the best man for Tony Francioso when he got married. He does not talk to me anymore. Bill Cosby said he would like to hang out with me like in the old days, but he's got a wife and kids. You didn't know I was that dangerous, did you? You sit here this close to me and you don't even look worried.
Have you tried ban?
So, no, but on the other hand, I'm not Che Guevara in the hills fighting the American Rangers either. I hate to say it, but I think this is an intense reaction to a nightclub comedian.
Why would the Kennedys be able to shut you up if they couldn't keep Mr. Manchester from publishing his book?
Didn't they? I didn't impugn the Kennedys. I didn't charge the Kennedys. I told you what was brought to me by my manager, who was liaison with that family. He brought that to me. He brought me that threat, and he told me that I would not work. And after that, I run into everybody in Los Angeles, New York, and they say, I want to hire you, but I'm not sure I can. I was with, a year ago December, after going from program to program and having been fired. I pointed out earlier I worked for Metro Media in Los Angeles. I was fired by that company 4 times in 20 months, and no reason has ever been given. Now, it's interesting. No cause. I was on the Sullivan Show, and I got up and I told a couple of jokes about the Democratic president, Lyndon Johnson, and Sullivan pulled me off the program. And he indicated to me that if I attacked Murphy and Reagan, I would be doing a greater social service. And I told him that I thought they were a little obscure on national television, and then he said that he would pay me off. I would not be on. But he wouldn't pay me the full salary. And he said that if I pressed for it, I would be in more trouble because I'm in trouble in this business already. There are a lot of phrases like that.
Do you think if you changed your material, you'd have better luck?
No, sir. No, sir, because the audience shows no indication. The audience is interested in what's happening. Any more than it was indicated at Metro Media that I should get off the subject of the assassination. The American people want to know who killed President Kennedy. So does Life magazine and the Saturday Evening Post, reasonably conservative. That's one of the issues. The audience wants to know, this generation wants to know why it's having a nervous breakdown.
But the American
as I
people
said.
can hire you. The nightclub owners and the television executives hire you.
Well, that's true. They're the arbiters, but I think you've got to get through to the audience. That's one of the good things about the nightclub business, or it was, I should say, past tense, I suppose. But you've got to stay with the people. If you can wait it out, maybe you can beat it. I don't know. I know it sounds illogical, but you've got to raise a flag of hope in a sea of evidence that's against it.
What's the publication date on your book?
I imagine it's going to be about a year before we get anything out,
What's
but
it called?
haven't got a title yet.
Manager is Milton Evans.
That's his name.
And
That's his
Beverly
name.
Hills.
Beverly Hills. His office is in the William Morris Agency. He's not a member.
Today.
I've made these charges on my television show in California 3 or 4 times, and the only trouble I had with Lawford was when I made a reference to the fact that the new governor, Reagan, might not renew his liquor license, and his lawyers asked me to withdraw that. Crescendo in Los Angeles, which is the #1 club there, said to me, I tried to hire you, and the agents didn't want to sell. They said you had offended the White House.
Who is that?
Shelley Davis.
Was there one specific instance that offended the White House, to use his remark? Was there one specific remark that you made, or one specific gag?
Not that I know of. As a matter of fact, as I recall the president, I knew him a little bit. He had a great sense of humor, which I miss very much, along with a good deal of the optimism around him. I don't recall any. I won't approach them. I'm not as probably a good investment at this point. I'm not that solvent. But, that's really not important. There's a certain degree of, you just got to keep swinging, that's all.
Back to this, that you support the Garrison investigation and its alleged conclusions.
I support adversary procedure in America. We'd know a lot more if Lee Oswald had had a trial. I think the district attorney has to sing people that partake in these things. There's a great element of fear in which people say. 4 weeks ago, this Sunday, in the New York Times, in the arts section, Tom Smothers is quoted. He says, I'd like to have...
Well, in the same position you are, maybe not for the same reason, but being the president, as you mentioned on television, that being blacklisted.
Well, blacklisted, of course, the connotation of blacklisted is that I was in subversive activities, and of course I was not, but it's a kind of a blackout, because there's no place, there's no sanctuary to work. I don't think there's anybody in that role, and that's part of the significance of the story, because after all, what are the sins? Really, what are they? And why aren't they forgivable? Because you've seen, as I said earlier, an awful lot forgiven. Nothing is forgivable in my case. I got sure.
What are
Okay.
you, Mr. Sahl, what are you going to say to doubters who suggest that all of these allegations are a publicity gimmick to boost a flagging career?
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful publicity gimmick in show business where everyone is reasonably sensitive to status, to tell people that you're out of work and you have no representation, no future, and a lurid past. It always helps a lot, especially when people are bidding on a competitive basis for your services. Fortunately, they're not bidding for mine. I would say that I didn't have a prepared statement, but I did have a 5-year rehearsal for this, and I'm reasonably briefed on the facts. What I'm going to have to say is that there was pressure brought to bear on me, and it's very hard when there is, I think they like to call it, conspirators like to call it, a gentleman's agreement about a performer and whether or not he works. It's arbitrary, and their arbitration. But if all else, that pressure continued. The irony of it is, it's gone on for 5 years, and there's been a systematic withdrawal of work in nightclubs at all television networks, and without exception, there haven't been any opportunists who've come along and asked me to work at a reduced rate. There haven't been any figures who represent the establishment who said I could be repatriated on a conditional basis if I, what is the phrase in fiction, sold out? Nobody's ever given me an opportunity to sell out. I either say what I think here or I don't say it at all. And should it be that there is no place to work, because the last event was in Los Angeles. This started in 1959, as I stated in the newspaper. And I mean, the adventure started in 1959. The outward suppression started about 62.
Mr.
And
Sahl, could it be that you are simply passé, that you've lost the bloom?
I don't think you'll find that by the attendance figures in any of the engagements. But the irony is that you can't go back to work. In January, I finished at Caesar's Palace, and I was told by the management in Vegas that I had outdrawn the previous attraction in the lounge 4-1, but that they couldn't hire me because there was interference beyond their control. And that's happened to me more than a dozen times in the nightclub business. And the pressure, as I was about to say before the question, reached a crescendo of sorts in Los Angeles in May, where I was on local television, and that's all I could get to earn a living, local television, for 58 weeks, 2 hours a week, and 15 hours a week on the radio. And I was doing a show which was about half comedy and half journalism, and one of the issues that came up, because the audience is interested in it, was the Kennedy assassination. And among other things, I got the first national interview with Jim Garrison in New Orleans. I played it, and I was fired on radio and on television. The irony is that the initial pressure was brought to me by people who said they loved their president. But when you bring up his name or ask who killed him, you're silenced. It's kind of elliptical. All his champions, who said they wanted me to stop talking about him and kidding about him when he was alive, don't seem to think too much about him now, or aren't disposed toward it.
Can you give us any specifics about this pressure that you're talking about?
Yes. The initial pressure started actually after, well, let me give it to you historically. It started in 1959 through a series of coincidences. I was represented by a man from Beverly Hills named Milton Ebbins, E-B-B-I-N-S, who also represents Peter Lawford and has for 15 years. In 1959, Ambassador Kennedy called me and asked me if I wanted to contribute some jokes to President Kennedy, Senator Kennedy at the time, of course, which I agreed to do. In 1960, after the election, Ebbins returned and said to me, the old man is unhappy with what you're saying. If you'd only listen to reason, you would do much better. And I informed him that I had no grudge against the president, but it's my basic policy to do jokes about the incumbent. And Ebbins sweated profusely and did from 60 to 62. And he finally told me that if I didn't get in line, which means kid Republicans only, I would think a house fell on me because the ambassador was very unhappy. I said, well, what's going to happen? Can you be specific? He said, you'll see. And he eventually told me I couldn't work anywhere in the United States. That's what would happen. And as it happened, he was a prophet, without honor in my opinion, but a prophet nevertheless. And systematically, employment was withdrawn. Now, I want to make it clear, I never saw the president, and I talked to the ambassador on the telephone when I went to work for them. But I never heard from them. I heard from a lot of people who were their agents, including my agent, my press agent in California, all of whom withdrew and resigned. And it was a systematic withdrawal of employment and social ostracism in Los Angeles, inevitably from professional liberals, who told me I had gone crazy and that people didn't want to hear that anymore. You see, in case you didn't know it, a Democratic administration is a utopia by definition. So if the audience doesn't want to hear it, I'll be happy to retrain under the OEO for some other kind of work. But Governor Shriver of Illinois. But I suspect that the audience does want to hear it. I don't think the country has changed that much. I haven't found that with the audiences.
It would appear then that you disaffected Kennedy Sr., or does this disaffection run throughout the family?
I have no information about anybody else in the family. I was in Washington in May working at a nightclub there for 2 weeks, and socially I saw both the Kennedy brothers, and they're very pleasant to me, so I have no conjecture about their role at all.
Well, what is the link between the Kennedy family and the entertainment business?
I don't know. You would have to ask them. I haven't suggested that there is. I was told repeatedly by people within the business that the old man was not too happy with me, that he thought I was disloyal on a basis of the humor. Now, you know, I don't mean to be vague in any way. There's a lot of people that I don't choose to pull into this at this time, but I'm not, if I have no work after this, and that's highly likely, I'm backstopped. I'm going to do a book about the whole thing, and I've already signed up to do it with a publisher in New York. Holt, as a matter of fact. Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston.
Mr. Royko's column was accurate then yesterday. It was a fair account of your trouble.
Yes, it was. And I might add, by the way, that this story, I've handed it out before. I handed it out in New York, and I handed it out in Los Angeles, and it was killed systematically. Although many guys were curious about it at the working level, it was usually killed at a managerial level, and there was no such suppression here, which is pretty impressive to me.
Do you have an agent now?
No, and I can't get one.
No one will handle
The
it?
last agent I had was Freddie Fields, who was, a very able fellow, creative management. He said to me, no agent can help you in the position you're in.
Did he give you a reason?
He said, there's just too much resistance. There's interference and there's resistance. Those are the words.
What's an example of the sort of thing that you have said which apparently has made people mad?
Well, they've never made a specific charge, which has made it difficult for me to throw myself in the mercy of the court because I don't know what the charge is. But the jokes about the trouble I was having during the Kennedy administration, I mean, the jokes were generally, I don't know, I think they were innocuous. They were the standard jokes. The president was young, and he was relatively inexperienced, and that's what I kidded about. But you're all familiar with that. You know what I do with the candidates. I did it with Eisenhower. I did it during the Eisenhower-McCarthy-Nixon period and didn't hear from anybody, except the banks, which were very happy with us all. The Democrats are something else again. Many of the liberals, again, would like me to impugn President Johnson, but I've never had any interference from him. And I take off on him pretty well. You have to. The audience is very disinterested in people that don't hold office.
How do you explain the fact that you're now working in Chicago, in a Chicago nightclub where the Kennedys have such enormous financial holdings?
Well, I have no I have no idea because I'm not impugning the Kennedy family. I worked here about 15 times in Chicago, and I have a long liaison with the people in this club, and I don't know if any pressure was brought to bear on them, and I don't know if they'd give in to it if it was. That's all speculative, but I can tell you that I worked in January in Vegas, and I packed the place, and I can't go back. And then I waited 3 months for a job, and I went to Washington for 2 weeks because I knew the people in that club. And then I waited 2 more months to play out an old contract from before the fire at Mr. Kelly's, and I can't get a job after that. And when I talk to my friends at the networks, I get answers like, if I think Mike quoted it in the column. If I mention your name to my superiors, I'll lose my job. My agent went to a studio with me for a series in 1 week a couple of months ago and got the answer, don't bring his name up in this office. He went to one of the 3 major networks, and the answer was never. Not only never, but an obsessive indication that I was suicidal because of the kind of people I go after and what I say. So the point is that maybe, if I am, maybe I am, I always was. How do we explain the acceptance initially? In other words, you're entitled to any opinion of me except surprise. I don't think anybody's earned that yet.
Let me ask, is there any other, could there possibly be any other reason, anything else in your background?
In my background? No, because I never. That's the irony. I watched. No, I've watched the communists be forgiven. I watched the Nazis be rehabilitated by a broad-minded America. I was never in the Boy Scouts of America, and the amazing part is, you all know my basic stance. My stance, it's true. I'm supposed to